Hello, I'm Peter Deegan, a member of the RSSL QP training faculty, and welcome to the next podcast in our series of My QP Journey. These interviews are aimed at talking with previous RSSL QP training alumni with the aim of paying forward their experiences to prospective trainee QPs of the future. Travelling down the QP training journey requires dedication, tenacity, curiosity, and of course a passion for our true customers, our patients. Of course, the first undertaking of anyone wishing to take such a journey is to learn from those who've already trodden that path so that we may gain from their insight, their wisdom, and know the best shortcuts and avoid the potholes. It's therefore my pleasure to welcome Gurpreet Birch, who's recently completed the QP journey with RSSL and successfully passed their QP Viva. Welcome, Gurpreet.
Hi.
And very importantly, many congratulations on your huge achievement. Welcome to the QP community.
Thank you.
Now, I usually ask the next question last, but this is actually our second attempt at recording today's podcast, because the first time we planned it, you'd actually got your name confirmed on the license just the day before, so you had to prioritise to actually do some urgent QP certifications.
Yes.
So my last question first is, how did it feel to actually certify your first batch after all that training and all those years trying to get there?
I was petrified. It's one thing when you go through and you're revising and you're practicing and you're sitting next to your QP and you're asking questions and you're learning. But then when you're the person in the room that people are asking questions of, you're like, all right, yeah, no, I have the answer. I do. Just give me a second to think. Yeah. So it was good. Scary, but good.
Scary but good. I think that's a very good way of putting it. I remember my first QP certification, it was many years ago. It was all lever arch files, not digital then days. But you had a certain personal responsibility that I could almost visualize that patient standing in front of me saying, "It's okay, Peter, you know what you're doing."
That's it.
Well, congratulations. Well done to start that QP certification journey. And again, I'm sure that you're probably going to just find it as a bit of a routine over the next few weeks and probably sometimes go, what on earth have I done? Be careful what you ask for. You might just get it.
I laugh because it's so true. I've had days where I've just gone, I asked for this.
Love it.
My pen has not stopped since I got on that license.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning then so that others can learn from your journey. It would be good, firstly, if you could just give us a bit of understanding about your background, qualifications and experience.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so originally I thought I was going to be a forensic scientist. So I did my first degree in forensic science. I then spent 18 months out with the police doing what a forensic scientist does. So that was definitely not for me. So I quite quickly went into pharmaceuticals. I started off first as a research scientist and then realized that I am more comfortable when I have strict rules and guidelines, and it's not a bit like, we'll try a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So then from research, I dove straight into quality, and I've not left since. So I started off, as many of us do, in the labs. First as a raw materials scientist, I worked my way up, I looked after stability. I worked very closely with QPs, trying to learn as much as I could from them. I was quite fortunate with the company that I was working for at the time. They put me through my master's at that time in industrial pharmaceutics. And as I was exposed to more different projects within the company, I had more collaboration with the QPs there. I realized that this was something I would like to become one day. And then I took a little bit of a detour. The shininess enticed me and I became an SLT member, and I thought, well, okay, maybe not QP, maybe I'll stick as a quality director and do those things, but I was very unhappy. I love dynamic quality. I love getting my hands dirty. I love being part of the solution and understanding what's happening on our manufacturing floor and trying to influence it that way. So then I took a very scary step and left the role that I was in and self-funded my first 2 modules until I found a role that was willing to support my QP journey. And I've not looked back since.
Fantastic. So your first degree is in forensic science, is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Which professional body did you approach to become a professional member?
Oh, Royal Society of Chemistry. So, whereas the first degree was forensic science, I believe that's just a posh word for analytical chemist, because that is most of the techniques for that we learned. And then my master's was in industrial pharmaceutics. Again, that was MSc. So I sit firmly with the Royal Society of Chemistry.
And how easy was it or otherwise to become a member of the Royal Society of Chemistry? The requirements say you have to be a chemist, pharmacist or biologist. Quite a pure statement there. And sometimes it's a bit hard to convince the professional bodies that you're eligible.
Oh, no, definitely. I had a fantastic quality director at the time who was my, I wouldn't say sponsor, but the person that vouches for you. So when you fill in your forms, you have recommendations from other peers who were already part of the society. So I had quite a few professional associates that I was working with who were already members. I've been talking about becoming a QP for so long. They were like, just join it is the first step. You need to do this. So yeah, we went through that process. That was quite daunting because it's another step where you have to wait for someone to say you're good enough. So you're thinking, do I want to expose myself to that and then have that knockback because I've made the choices I've already made? I mean, I know I can't go back and do another degree right now. I mean, I had a young family at the time, so it was daunting, but I'm glad that I was convinced to do it.
Oh, that's very good. I'm a pure analytical chemist, so I was able to join the RSC straight away. But I think my reflection on becoming a member of the Royal Society of Chemistry, I'm very proud that my certificate is still up there on my wall, was the Code of Professional Conduct. And I always say I did a sandwich degree. I went away, work away in industry. One of my potential choices was working at the Forensic Science Laboratories in Wetherby. But I missed out on that, and I went and worked in the nuclear industry, which is great fun. But when I came back, I always say, particularly then joining the Royal Society of Chemistry, I went away as schoolboy and came back a chemist, because it just engenders that professional work ethic, and it suddenly clicks in you, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think working in our industry, it's part of your day to day. I mean, it's what you do your work against. You hold yourself accountable and everything. I know I personally do. I think this could potentially go into my child. Am I happy with how this is?
Very much so. So the first step in any journey is to look at the requirements. And we've got a study guide and the guidance notes, which are a deep dive set of information pulled together by the joint professional bodies. Very useful, very deep, very scary, I suppose. So what I want to do is explore your journey about interpreting the guidances, etc., and therefore what choices you made. Then it talks about the knowledge and experience requirements in the study guide, which is explicit, and it would be great to listen to your journey of how you gained experience and how others can learn from that. But then finally pulling all that together, you've done some training, you've done some experience, and how you pull that together to fill out the application form, to give you that confidence to walk into that Viva room. That's really the journey that I want to go through today, if that's okay. So you've talked about your eligibility and what interested you in that QP role. How did you then, once you thought, hang on a minute, this is a potential role for me, how did you start to break down and analyze the requirements versus your gaps, and what initial choices did you make?
So when the very, very early days, I was speaking to QPs and they handed me the requirements, the beautiful thick dossier. They're like, this is what you need to meet. Have a read and we'll talk. And I looked at that and I thought, I know nothing about law. I've lived in the lab my whole life. I need to experience the wider part of our business. So I looked through that study guide and I identified what I personally felt as though I had gaps. And then it was a journey of looking at how I could grow in the current position I was in, or making that choice of moving to a different company, which would allow me to have the experience that I needed by the study guide. And that took a while. So 2017, I started making those moves career-wise just to be exposed to different things. And then I think 21 was when I started my first module. That's when I thought, right, looking at the study guide, I've had exposure to clinical trials, I've had exposure to biologics, APIs. As my role grew, I got to be exposed to the legal side of our requirements and everything. So I felt like I had more of me that was suitable then to become a QP. I wasn't just a lab analyst. I had a rounded experience. So I'd moved out of QC, had a more exposure to technical and QA and manufacturing. And I felt, right, okay. And now I feel as though I'm at a place where I can start these modules. The learning would actually mean something to me because I can link it back to something that I've already done and join those pieces that way. So I'm quite a visual learner. So I knew full well that if I hadn't had hands-on experience, someone could hand me a book, I would not be able to put it into use the way that it was meant. I would have to know how it was fitting in first. So that was how I started my journey.
That's very interesting, because what you're saying is you took the practical experience route to give you a pointer and an experience to be able to walk into the theoretical training with that knowledge or that perception, rather than a theoretical hypothetical view.
Definitely, yeah.
How easy was that? Because in some ways, you do the training to find out what's required, and then you start to look for the experience to get that practical knowledge. You've done it the other way around. So
I did.
you're feeling your way around without knowing whether you're right or wrong.
100%, yeah. I mean, I was definitely quite fortunate there, quite blessed that it panned out. So the study guide is broken down quite nicely, module by module. So you can see in this area, this is the type of experience I need, and in this area, this is the type of experience I need. And then I was able to roughly figure out, okay, so it'd be great if I had a bit more exposure to how APIs are made. So then I was head of quality for an API manufacturing site, and that gave me exposure to a wide array of things, understanding continuous manufacture, understanding the requirements around that. And then because we were supplying to sister companies, you get to understand your supply chain, the route, and how your quality systems speak to each other. So that's another one of the modules there. So yeah, that's pretty much how I broke it down. I looked at the study guide. I was like, right, this is where I am now. I can roughly say I meet this like this way. And I suppose at a stretch, I could say my experience links to that. I wouldn't feel comfortable speaking to anyone about this. So this is where I now need to focus. And that's just how I spent it.
The study guide is very clear about the 3 core modules, and the rest are elective, almost further modules of importance. So the 3 modules are role and professional duties, law and admin, and pharmaceutical quality system. Did you see those as the top 3 that must do first, or did you take a different approach?
No, they are the top 3, and they are very, very important. For me, foundation is the most important because I can't build a house on soft sand. So I thought I need to get my basics in a nice, robust way before I think I'm ready for law, for roles and professional duties. I mean, I worked with so many QPs, and there was always this air of finality. You know what it's like? You need to be sure about this. There was that, not dread, but seriousness. So I thought, right, okay, so I know no matter what happens, I need to make sure that I understand the severity of my choices. So let's get all of the background in first, make sure I'm comfortable understanding the key players, the bits that influence all the other bits. And that way you can make informed decisions. So when you make a decision, it's based on all the correct information you've asked for, and it's not just based on assumption. I think I know this because I read somewhere. It's very much of a, I can visually see how that fits in. I then feel equipped that I can ask the right questions before I make a decision.
So once again, it's a different approach. It's a reverse approach to
It
let me
is.
understand where the foundations are and what I need to know. Then I'll go and learn explicitly the facts and the information that I do need to know.
Yeah. I'm a bit awkward, me.
But that's a great way of learning. Everybody learns differently. You've got Kolb's learning cycle. You've got your activists and your reflectors. You and I are very clearly activists. You buy a new piece of kit, you open the box and you make it work. Whereas others will need to read the instruction manual for 2 or 3 days before I even get the kit out. And I think exploring the world, sensing that world, I think is a really interesting approach that you've taken. So now I'd like to explore that technical side, that exploration, that structured approach to the joint study guide, the guidance notes. What you said is that you've sensed the world around you. You can't build a house on sand, so you've got some good foundations. You've talked to a few people. Who did you talk to?
So I spoke to QPs that were already in the wonderful QPing world. And then I was looking at training programs, seeing what was out there. Because I took the decision to be self-funding, I was seeing how that would look. Being a parent, 2 young children's mortgage, you have to be sensible with where your pennies go. So I had a little plan and I thought, right, RSSL are offering a webinar to explain the ins and outs. Let's have a look at that before we go full feet in, right? So I went there and I signed on to the webinar and I thought, okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense. So I was like, right, okay, let's speak to someone. So then I reached out to RSSL and started up a dialogue there. I got as much information as I felt as I needed, how the modules are planned out, the frequency, whether they're in person, virtual. Because obviously when you've got kids in school, there's a balance that you have to maintain. And then once I felt as though I had a pretty good picture of what life training would look like, we sat down as a family, we discussed, I explained the payment options, I explained how the modules are run, and my future plan of I will find a trainee QP role. So it's only a couple of modules that I have to pay for myself, willing it alive. And that's where we went. But the draw for me was, does it fit in with where I as a human am right now? Because I wasn't in a place where I could stop everything else in my life and only study. Lots of us aren't like that. Unfortunately, we're not in our 20s anymore, right? We've made commitments, we've made life choices. So I was like, this needs to fit with the person I am now. And because I could see it fitting and that there would be no impact to how family life was looking at that point, I thought, yeah. And that's how I made my choice.
I really like that reflection and your realization that it doesn't just affect you, it affects
Oh, no.
all your family. Your near family, your far family, your work colleagues. Everybody thinks, okay, it's going to be hard. I'm going to have to do a bit of study. It's going to affect my work. But it is a journey of a family as well, because you've got to
Definitely.
be very selfish and lock yourself away, as I did in the loft office, away from my family, to do that heavy module. I did a postgraduate diploma as well through Sunderland University at the time, distance learning. So I had essays and timings to meet, etc., which really impacted upon family life. So in some ways, one could look at it that it is a selfish thing, but selfish is binary, is unilateral. It has to be an holistic and agreed and family support module, because in those dark days, those are the support network that's going to really keep you going.
Oh, 100%. So I did my master's distant learning like you did your postgraduate. And I remember having to take, my children were very young at that time. I think my youngest must have been 1. So, I mean, we're talking quite small. I was full term pregnant when I sat my last exam. It was a bit, thinking, please let me make it. But especially with the QP journey, my girls and my husband have been through that with me. They used to help me when I was making my revision guides, the beautiful brain dumps that I like to do. So it links a module and reads out further. And then when I called home to my girls to let them know that I had passed, God bless my eldest, she had written in a card, if I have to listen about Annex 1 one more time. So it is a family journey, 100%. And it's great that, I mean, people need to be aware because it does take over so much of your life. And when you do want to do something fun, a little bit of guilt sits within you because you're like, I should be studying. But it's okay to have a balance. Yeah.
One of the commonalities that jumps out to me for everybody who I've interviewed is, yes, that family balance, but you have to have a very core personal focus and a real eye on that prize for the future, for that goal.
Yeah.
And that's personal, and nobody can understand that except those that are going through it with you.
Yeah.
So how did you build your network? You'd said you talked to other QPs. Were they in the same company? Were they external? How did you gather that support network of those that know?
I was quite fortunate actually. Everywhere I've worked with really nice QPs. But obviously, you spend so much time at work. Those relationships, they would stand whether you're still at that company or not. So it's previous companies I worked for, their QPs. I worked alongside some contract QPs who then obviously they scatter about, but they're still in touch. So I just used to ask very strange questions of everyone. The QPs that I was working alongside as I was getting ready to take my Viva were fantastic. I would spend a good 2 hours every other day, maybe twice a week, I think it was. And we would just practice speaking because for me it was I'm sure you must have found it as well. It's that muscle memory, the verbal muscle memory, because you know it, but then it's how do I articulate that across is getting the practice in. And you can say it all you want in front of the mirror and into your kids and the husband, and they look at you and go, yeah, but I need someone to pick me apart just so I know I can withstand.
I really like that. I need somebody to pick me apart. I just did exactly the same thing. I was working for a very large pharmaceutical company. I made a choice to join that company because they had a wider range of formulations. And there were about 10 or 15 of us going through the QP training at that time. Every lunch, every social event, they would almost like jump out and ask this question. If you had a meeting, it was constant and it was great. I really like what you say about that muscle memory. And I think if that's one piece of advice I can give to anybody listening in today who's starting on the journey, get to chat to as many people as you can. Join the RSSL WhatsApp community. There's lots of questions going around there. Meet up for a virtual lunch. The other candidates that I've interviewed have said, nobody has ever said no. They've said, maybe not now, but when. And I think that's really where that QP community and that QP alumni really helps you. Sometimes you feel very alone, don't you?
Oh, definitely. And you're not sure where to go. But like you said, everyone's always so willing to help. I used to ask any QP I met, whether it be at a conference or whether it's through CPD at work, do you mind spending an hour with me just to go through some practice questions? And I read this and I don't fully understand what that means in like our language. Could you help me? And there was always a willing person there to help. I had 3 different QPs go through my application before I submitted. Just because you read it over and over and then you just get blind of your own words because you've just looked at it for so long and you get to the point with your application. I certainly did where I thought, I hate you. I hate your application.
But I like what you're saying is that one needs a reflection, a second, third, fourth pair of eyes. Just say, am I the mad one here? Am I the sane one here? Is this right? But my journey in filling the application form, I had one person in front of me all the time, and that was that patient. Why am I doing this? Why am I spending all my time to just put my signature on a piece of paper? My very first experience of QP certification, I just graduated with my chemistry degree, and my first job was in a QC laboratory for a very small pharmaceutical company. And all of a sudden, one day, this guy who I didn't know came in, looked at a few documents, signed it, and walked away. And that was the QP. That was quite a few years ago. There's a bit more to it these days. And I just thought, what's he doing? And why does that authorize the batch to go out on the truck? So I caught him over lunch and I said, what are you doing? And he goes, well, I'm certifying the batch. But he was a pharmacist. And he said, I'm doing it to ensure that our patients get the right product for the right time, safety, efficacy, and quality at the time. And I was just a raw graduate. Something clicked in me and something just sort of jumped on my little shoulder and went, I want to do that. That sounds pretty cool. That sounds pretty important. And many QPs have gone through a personal experience where a member of their family may have taken ill, and the medicines are life-saving, life-changing, life-enhancing. That's why we're in it. I think that's really my journey, was to understand that. I'm the patient's advocate as well as the business advocate. So Gurpreet, we've talked about the journey that you started. You did an experiential first and then training second type approach on that basis that you wanted a solid foundation to start. One of the requirements is to obtain a sponsor as part of this journey. So for those listening, what's the role of a sponsor and how critical are they in supporting your QP training journey?
Okay, I'll answer the second one first. Very critical to your QP journey. They are your signboard, your mentor for certain aspects, most definitely, but also like a guidance star. You need to have that trust and faith in a sponsor to feel as though you can ask what you feel are the most stupidest questions without any fear of judgment, because that's the best way to learn. They're to help guide with your application process. When we talk about our QP application, before I started the journey, I thought, oh, there's application, it's fine. It is your entire career written down to justify why you are ready to become a QP. And it's the first hurdle, it's the first test of filling out that application. And you need someone that is able to look at it without any judgment, because, sometimes you write something down, you're thinking, I don't think that's right. Please tell me this is enough.
Because you don't know how much is enough, do you?
Exactly. And there were some points in time where I thought, it doesn't matter what I put, it will never be enough, because it just feels that much like, little old me, this is all I've done so far, surely. So you need that someone to look at it in a very matter-of-fact point of view. No, this is what they're looking for. Yeah, you've got the experience there, you just need to word it this way. And the key parts of I have been part of, which are big faux pas, you don't put that down. Because I guess as a society, we don't want to come across as too arrogant, too bolshy. So you always try to downplay what you've actually managed to do so you don't come across as big-headed. But then with the application, you need to demonstrate you've actually done what you've said you've done. So it's selling yourself, which definitely for me went against my grain. It was, that was hard. So you need a good sponsor there who's able to know what have you done and guide you in how to put that down in the application, but also to use that experience that you've had and train you to be able to verbalize it in a Viva scenario. Because you can ask a question and be like, well, I don't know what that means. But then when you're taught by someone of what that question is actually asking you in regards to the study guide and the modules and in what aspect, you're thinking, well, no, I actually done that. I can explain that like this, and this. So
Because production don't come to you and say, I've got a hypothetical question here. This has fallen off. That's gone wrong. That didn't do what it was supposed to do. Can you still release the batch, please? The previous QP passed it. Everything was fine.
oh, my favorite. We've always done it this way.
So that sponsor is your guide, mentor, arbiter, Jiminy Cricket on your shoulder, sort of advisor, soothsayer, rescuer.
Yeah. And there needs to be you need to have the kind of relationship where you are comfortable learning from that person, but also that their teaching style matches yours. I don't feel as though anyone can be anyone's sponsor and everything's hunky-dory. It could just be me. I'm quite particular about what kind of people I like in my circle, who I feel comfortable being that exposed to. So yeah, I think it's very important when you're looking at sponsors. If you are with a large company that has a multitude of QPs there who can act as a sponsor, perhaps just gauge your relationships on if they gave you advice in your personal life, would you listen to it? Or would you be like, yeah, whatever. Because that speaks volumes of whether they make a good sponsor for you or not.
I like that. I think that's really important. It has to be a good fit together.
Definitely.
Did you have a wide choice, or did you have a very narrow choice, if not singular choice, of your sponsor? We're now working for virtual companies. We're now working for small companies, startup companies that require a QP. Your network is not that broad.
It's not that broad. And your sponsor really should be someone who you work with, who can vouch for your abilities. So I started my journey self-funded and therefore had no sponsor. So I joined a company because it was the right position, and they had one permanent QP who then would become my sponsor. Yes, we got on. Yes, it worked for a bit. Unfortunately, it didn't work forever. So our industry, especially the virtual industry, you know, there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of buyouts, companies get sold, and it just didn't fit what I wanted anymore. I was not getting the support I thought I needed from that sponsor at that time. The requirements that they felt they needed from me, I guess I wasn't fulfilling, in the sense of they wanted more outside time to be able to train, and that was not something I could commit to. My personal time was when I was doing my own revision, but also where I was accessible to my children. So that wasn't something I was willing to give up. That was my hard line. Yeah. Obviously, all grown-ups, we move on, life changes. I approached another QP to become my sponsor, who was fantastic, really took me under their wing, really supported, and that got me through where I needed to be.
I think that's a very honest approach. Thank you for sharing that, because trainee QPs will have that dichotomy. I've got a limited range of sponsor choices. It might not be the perfect fit. Is it good enough or is it not good enough? And you have to take ownership of that. Your sponsor can't own your QP journey. You have
Yeah.
to own that. And if it's not the right mix, you have to make some hard decisions.
Definitely. And it was very, very hard. I remember feeling that you work so hard. I had structured my career to make sure that I met all the requirements I felt I needed, and to provide myself with the confidence to be able to do a good job, because at the end of the day, what we do is important. It impacts people. That's someone's family, someone's world. And then at that last hurdle, I felt as though I was being forced to beg someone to give me something that was rightfully mine. And that hurt.
I can understand that. It's very personal and it's a long journey. How many years did it take you from start to finish?
So I started making strategic moves with my career in 2017, but I started the modules when I felt as though I was professionally in a sound place in 2021, and then I passed last October.
So that's about 3 to 4 years, which I think is the average for most QP trainees to go through. You can go too quickly and that will jump out in the application form. We will talk about the application form later, but it is about that quality, and it is the role of the assessor to read between the print and assess whether this person has actually done that, seen that, been that, rather than just wrote that.
Yes, definitely. Because I think it's quite easy to tell in an application of your depth of knowledge, because if you know the subject, you'll be able to write in a way that clearly dictates, it clearly shows you know that subject. Whereas if you've watched from afar, what you write down becomes quite superficial, and that's quite easy to read.
There is a balance, though, in writing the application. Sometimes that's all you've done is I've watched it, and it's okay sometimes to say, I don't have that deep professional background, but I know the key words. So the example I always give is that I've got no biological sciences qualification or experience to my name whatsoever. I was a chemistry, physics, maths guy, industrial chemistry, analytical chemistry. Okay, my wife's the biochemist, and our 16-year-old son is going through his A levels. I teach him chemistry, she teaches him biology for a reason. what's really important to be is honest with yourself in the application form. I remember the night before my QP Viva, I rang my colleague Nigel up, who's a biologist. I went, Nigel, what if they ask me a biologics question? I won't be able to answer it. And he says, you just say, it's not my area. I wouldn't work in that area. But I know the core requirements. I wouldn't necessarily have that breadth of experience, or MHRA wouldn't allow me on a biologics license. But what if I'm exposed to that product or a recall or something like that? I know the core elements. That's okay. You don't have to be worldly experienced in every single corner of the study guide. You've just got to be able to provide that professional judgment. And once again, I always go back to what I was taught. The training to be a QP is not intended to make you an expert. It's to make you professionally aware so that you can certify to assess whether the batch has met the requirements of the marketing authorization and meets safety, efficacy, and quality, and is being manufactured in an adequate and well-controlled pharmaceutical quality system. It's just a structured approach, and you should know the majority of it, but you don't need to be an expert. I know who the sterile expert is to be able to assess certain things or be able to advise me. I remember when I was doing my QP training, they dragged me into sterile aseptic manufacture, and they were doing a process qualification and a sterilizer qualification. I looked at the print on the document. I didn't have a clue, but my validation and sterilization expert was able to guide me through that. And that's the role of a QP, not to be that sole occupier of the island.
Yeah. Is knowing who to speak to and when, and whose knowledge you require at that point.
Know what the keywords are so you know that you've got that semblance of truth or verification.
Yeah.
Well, that's a nice segue, actually, to the certain elements of the curriculum which the Joint Study Guide requires you to walk through. I go back to the 3 foundation knowledge elements. You had said very openly that you did a bit of sort of experiential work before you joined the training course itself. How did you approach your learning, given that the study guide says these are the foundation modules which you need to know before you take any of the other ones? How did you approach that?
You may not like my answer, but in my head, these were the black and white ones. So in my brain, there are black and white, yes, no, binary, must, and then there are, I can use my logic, as can you, and we can have a discussion about a problem, and we may get to different points, but my logic still is valid, as is your logic, and then we just come to an agreement. For law and admin, that is black and white. It is very much of a, these are the laws and regulations. This is what I need to know. So for me, it was making sure I understood what they meant. It's all right learning it parrot style, but you kind of pick up when someone doesn't know what a word means. So it was making sure I actually understood what the law was trying to tell me and how that fits into our life as QPs. And I did the same for roles and responsibilities. Books that, again, Annex 16, that's black and white. We know exactly what is expected from us. We know our 6 legal duties. We know the 21 delegatable ones. It's there. We know this. Again, so I had notes which I had written out longhand fashion with keywords highlighted. And then from there, I took those and I put them onto cue cards where I would take them around with me in my pocket when I'm waiting in the opticians for my kids, or, you know, when you're out doing whatever, you've got them there as you're waiting to go through. And then at the same time where the date for my Viva was coming, so I had already submitted my application, been accepted, all of that beautiful stuff's going on. My daughter was also studying for her GCSEs, so we would have study sessions where we sat on the dining table making study maps for the 3 main ones. They are, in my eyes, black and white. There are certain aspects you have to know that they're non-negotiable. It's not about using your logic there. It's very much of a, I understand what's expected of me and I know exactly where to find it and I know what this means in my day-to-day life. So I took it as that and I made sure I understood how that actually fed into what I'm doing on my day-to-day, but also how I was able to communicate that across so they were aware that I knew what was needed.
That's perfect, because that's my experience as well. The way that I usually describe it is I may well be looking at a microbiology report from an aseptic manufacturing product, but that's quite specialist. But no matter what I'm working on, every single day I will mention pharmaceutical quality system once or twice. Every working day I will talk about role and professional duties of a QP. Every single day I will talk about the laws, the regulations, the guidances. And I remember when I was going through my training and I was talking to a peer, a colleague, saying, it's really hard. How am I going to remember this? And they just said, just learn it. One day, could be 5, could be 10 years' time, could be 6 months' time, could be next week. Somebody will say something and something will come out of your mouth. Can I understand the legal basis of this, or da 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 da, etc.? And everybody will look at you and go, that person is wise. And it'll just come from somewhere. And that's really what you're trying to do. But those 3 core foundation modules are words that I talk about every day as a QP. The other ones are probably more specialist and will be talked about at some point, but not every day. And that's how I articulate it. So how did you approach the other modules then? I was an analytical chemist. And when I was doing my postgraduate diploma, I just had to write an essay. I didn't have to go through the whole module. I had to do an essay on an analytical process, for example, to gain exemption. Now, the thing about it is that my sponsor at the time said, actually, it's not about gaining an exemption. It's being able to use that to say, I've already got the required experience to fill the application form. I don't have to do any more theory because I do that every day. So exemption is probably not the right word, but already able to fulfill the requirements to fill the application form is probably a better way to do that. Did you just do everything just in case, or did you tailor it to your experience and needs and costs?
I did. I tailored it for my experience and needs. I'd spent a long time of my professional career in the lab in some form or another, whether as an analyst or as, the head of QC. So it was very much of I understand the requirements from the study guide, and I was able to use the experience that I had from the many years in industry. We try not to put a number on it because it makes me feel quite old. But I was able to demonstrate my competency through my experience already, rather than having to do the additional theoretical learning. I was quite fortunate as well that obviously if you're working on a manufacturing site, chances are there's an associated QC lab. So you just go in there and make sure you stay up to date and fresh. I did pick modules in a certain order, but that was for my own preference more than anything. I find that maths and stats I found quite daunting. And I thought it's a big commitment taking this journey and then realizing partway through it's not for me because of this one module. So let's just do this module, and if I understand it and I can actually put it into use in my head, like play it in a scenario that I've been in and understand how it fits in there, then yes, this journey is for me. And that's how I picked out the modules, the ones that I thought would be showstoppers. I made sure I did earlier on in my journey, and then I carried on going. Each module I thought, no, actually, I understand how this fits in my life. I understand what they're trying to teach me here, and I can put this into practical experience. And then I'd pick the next module that I would find scary.
Fascinating about your maths and stats. I started in the laboratories and I was doing the uniformity of content. Was it 10 or 20 tablets, and you put them in the individual vials? And I'm thinking, there's 1.5 million tablets downstairs in the warehouse and I'm testing 10. What's that all about? And I just got very curious. So I jumped on the maths and stats to help me understand this. And I had to then do a dissertation on statistical process control. And I still have that essay that I wrote. And it's still one of the most used modules from my professional career side, because I'm very curious about that. Why? Well, why does that? How is that representative? That's surely not possible. And I've had many a discussion with statisticians over the theoretical side. I have to confess, I'm useless at maths. I have almost got dyscalculia, but for some reason, maths and stats floated my boat, and I loved it as an analytical chemist. were the most fondly thought of modules I ever did. How about that?
I love that. I don't have such fond memories of the module. I enjoyed learning about it, but I was so petrified that it would be something so foreign to me. Because like you do maths in school and then like you just move on to like the subjects you're comfortable with that you have a true passion for. It had been many, many, many moons since I'd done pure maths, as in just maths. So I thought, oh, a QP needs to know this? Why? But then you sit down and you do your module and you're like, oh, I understand. Okay, yeah, this makes sense.
And I appreciate you're very much like me. You're clearly an activist. And I had a problem that I needed to solve, and I used that as a tool. So I needed that as part of my toolkit. Others may not need that as part of their toolkit, and therefore not as excited as I used to get about Schuhart's charts and Deming's 7 rules and everything, you know?
Oh, I tell you, I know them now.
I know. But it's been able to add value to those meetings by asking those insightful words where the mathematician or the statistician goes, this person knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So what you're saying is that you took a selective approach to learning the requirements, but you took a strategic approach to learning to make sure that you still were able to
Definitely.
fulfill the requirements of the study guide as regards the application form. So I want to talk now about the practical experience. We've talked a lot about the training, the theory, the modules, etc. How did you approach your fulfillment of the practical requirements to give you that confidence to fill that application form in?
Oh, yeah. Every chance I'd get, I'll go, shall I do that for you? So I was exposed to PQRs, first writing, then reviewing, stability, first trending, then seeing how it fits into your PQR, TAs. I just kept on picking up things that I wasn't 100% comfy with, that I thought, right, I need to understand how this fits into our wider life. And if I was really confused or unsure, or it still didn't feel as comfortable as I would like it to be. So I'm very much of a, I need to feel as though I'll be able to answer your question before I think, right, I'm comfy, I can do this now. I would speak to my QP, I'd sit down and go, look, I'm looking at this. And you said X, Y, Z, but I don't get how you got there because this is my logic. And I just don't understand your logic. So if you can hold my hand through it. And like that, I realized, well, all of our logic is slightly different from experiences. My logic's no worse than your logic, and is all about risk and how we assess that risk, and understanding that the risk we're talking about is patient safety, not anything else. Right? And that was the game changer for me. And that's where I thought, yeah, okay.
I was interviewing Rebecca Buzakesi, who recently passed her Viva as well. And I talked about the same issue with her. How did you get that practical experience? And she said exactly what you did. I asked people, if there's a problem that manifests itself, can I have a go? Can I be part of it? Can I be involved in it? Because you've got to go out there, because it might not hit your desk on a day-to-day basis based upon your role. So you've got to go find the problems and you've got to be involved in it. One of the challenges I put to Rebecca, which I'll put back to you, is, but that then makes you 20% busier because it's not your actual job to do, but you need to gain experience. How did you approach that?
It was for me. I wasn't doing it for anyone else. This was my goal. It's my journey. So yeah, they'd employ me to do my job and I'm making sure that I'm getting everything that they need as well. But at the same time, I'm on a journey and I'm going to be a little bit selfish. And yeah, I'll take on that additional work. Yeah, I don't need to go out and watch that movie because I need this experience. For where I want to be, for where I've planned to be, this is what I need right now. So I'll make that sacrifice because long term, I'm going to get my goal.
You mentioned at the beginning of our interview that you were advised rightly to avoid I watched, I saw, I was involved in. No,
Yes.
I did. I took that and I did, and that is where it really jumps out. And as I always say, the application form is reviewed by the assessor, and the assessor is trying to get under your skin to understand, has that person ever gone through that. And I will want to ask real practical questions during the Viva to assess the reality of that. So I like what you're saying. It is a personal discipline. You've just got to get out there and you've really got to do that. And you've got to gather those experience coins in your box.
Yeah. No one else can do it for
Nobody
you.
else is
You
going
can
to
watch
do it
from the
for you.
sidelines, but it's not going to expose you the way you need to be exposed.
So how did you approach then the completion of your application form? Some people do it after each experience. Some people do it right at the end. Some people do it partway through. What was your application form completion journey?
I did module by module because after we've done a module, you think, oh, I understand because now this makes sense when I did this, this, and this. I thought, right, write it down while it's still fresh in your head. My first sponsor suggested that, and that was the best advice because once you've completed your entire application form, we're talking about 44 pages, if not more, you then have to go through and someone's got to read it. Some poor soul has to sit there and read through your entire life. So you need it to be as succinct as possible. So then you go through it again and you try to take out useless sentences and then you read it again to make sure it still flows. And then probably about the fourth time, you're just like, I don't know anymore because it all reads the same. I can't remember if I read that paragraph again. And that's when you rely on your network to go, please read my application form. Tell me what I'm missing.
Another delegate said, write it down whilst it's still in your short-term memory so you get the richness of the facts and the experience rather than something 2 years ago I did this, I can't remember. It will mean that you probably have to have more of a theoretical approach to it than the actual experience. Fascinating in terms of memory. We only lay down the memory we want to lay down. We don't lay down facts very well as human beings. So get it down now. And finally, we have a Viva after we've completed our application form, sent it in, had a couple of iterations, and then you've been invited for the Viva. It would be great to listen to your experience of the Viva, obviously, but in many ways, the Viva experience is already well documented. So I'd like to work backwards from your Viva and to reflect on what you would have done differently, if anything. So, based upon your experience of the Viva, did the application form help you in your Viva? What did you miss? Or what did you absolutely nail in your training that made a difference to your Viva?
So in regards to the application form, I think that provided focus of my journey and the little pearls I collected along the way. So that's experience. That's, oh, I've seen that problem before. And I remember we did this, this, and this, and then we found that. So those were my little pearls that I had collected, which I could then take with me for my Viva. And then what I would do differently, I'm not sure I would do anything differently. I had prepped like I was going to war. I was being interrogated. That was the level of prep I did. That's how much I was going in for. And when I got there, it was nothing the way I expected. It was far more pleasant. I wasn't torn apart. There weren't ogres, but I prepared as though I was going in for that. And I think that's what gave me the comfort knowing, okay, I'm sat in front of you now. It doesn't matter what you say to me because I'm pretty sure I've got an answer one way or another. And then they were just nice. And I thought, oh, that's lovely. Thank you for smiling at me.
You will be assessed on your merits if you're not meeting the requirements to fulfill the obligations of a QP as regards the assessment of BAT certification for safety, efficacy, and quality in the legal obligations. They'll tell you, you'll have an action plan, you'll come back.
Yeah.
And if you have met the requirements, I've always explained it that it's like the old canal boat analogy, that you approach a lock and you're at the bottom and it's full. You can't open those doors. You have to go up and you have to be operating at that level for the doors to open naturally because of that equalized water pressure behind each side. And if your doors open and you float through, that will be seen by the
Fantastic.
assessors.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. No, you're right. But it was very much of I had poured so much into the preparation. I remember psyching myself out. This was a week before. You know, when you're thinking, there's no return. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. What have I done? I remember thinking, I've poured everything I've had. I have stopped life. I've not left this house. I have just revised and practiced and rehearsed, and I had virtual sessions with mentors to practice the verbal thing. I had new brain charts on top of the old brain charts, and I hit that point where if they say I'm not good enough, what else can I do? I was at that point. So maybe not go that crazy, it would be something I would say.
But if you don't want it, you won't feel that way.
Yeah.
It's important. It is professionally rewarding, life affirming, whatever you want to call it. It's important. You spent such an amount of time being selfish to that extent, no matter how much one's family, friends, and cohorts try to understand. Unless you've been through that journey, they can't understand. And it's that personal, professional acumen at the end of the day. So in our final couple of minutes, what are the 3 pieces of advice you'd give to anybody either starting or progressing through their QP journey right now from what you've learned?
Don't be scared of the application. Do it as you go along. While it's fresh, it's so much easier. You do get a bit application blind, so I would change the order in which you review your own work. Going top down, perhaps bottom up is also great, and ask as many questions as you can and expose yourself to as many random situations. Because the more weird and wonderful things you see, the more pearls you collect that help you then to make the right questions to be asked.
Gurpreet, thank you so much for spending your time and sharing your QP journey today. And thank you for choosing RSSL. It would be useful to know whether you valued the RSSL journey with you.
Oh, most definitely. The support I have received from RSSL has been amazing. I wouldn't have made this journey if they weren't willing to support me as a self-funded person at the start, and the flexibility that provided and the additional support that came alongside that. That was just, thank you guys so much for helping me achieve my goal.
Thank you very much for that feedback. I think it's really important that training providers like RSSL understand the dynamic of the new generation trainees coming through, smaller companies, startup companies, virtual companies. And we're starting to see a lot more people like yourselves who are self-funding. And it's that flexible approach. And what we're trying to do is provide that mentorship, that guidance. These podcasts are part of that, sharing the QP journey. And for those considering starting their QP journey, it's really important that we continually share our experiences. And as you said, picking up the phone, picking up the WhatsApp and saying, can you just help me here? Can I just listen? What's your experience? How did you do this? Why did you do that? I haven't got a clue what I'm talking about here. Help me out. And I think that's that support network that's so vital to you.
Oh, definitely. And the hot topics as well. I did a lot of the short online e-learnings when obviously the world came to a stop, and they were just fantastic. Just as a refresher as you're going through and you're thinking, oh, I can't actually remember what we discussed here. Brilliant. Definitely. Wonderful services.
Oh, that's really nice to know. And I shall certainly pass that back to the RSSL group, who work really hard to ensure that people like yourselves succeed in your personal career journey. Gurpreet, thank you so much for talking to me today. A real pleasure. Good luck with the future, and I hope you've got more than one pen, because it sounds like the first one's going to run out pretty soon by the number of batches that you've already started certifying.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Peter.
My pleasure.
Take care.